Good afternoon and welcome to Black and Azul and our expanding pregame coverage of the San Jose Earthquakes versus Sporting KC in the MLS Cup playoffs. My name is Charles Wollin, and I'm joined by my fantastic and wonderful team, Joel Soria, Alex Morgan, and Jamon Moore. This is the first playoff game for the San Jose Earthquakes in 3 years. Big expectations for Matias Almeyda and this squad today. They came in and they are the number 8 seed playing the number 1 seed Sporting KC. Obviously, lads, we've talked about it throughout this season, and Joel, you have been following Matias Almeyda's career since he came to this team, but this is obviously the biggest match for this San Jose Earthquakes club in the last 3 years, and the biggest match for Matias Almeyda at the helm of this team.
Yeah, there's no question about that. And first and foremost, obviously, I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight on what is a very special coverage of the San Jose Earthquakes as they go into, as you mentioned, Charles, the biggest game in the Matias Almeyda era. Without a doubt, the Quakes have to go out and play to their strengths. They have to not shy away from the style that they very much enjoyed under Almeyda. And tonight, against Sporting Kansas City, a team that also has that blue collar and underdog ethos, they'll battle it out, and they will, play and see if they can potentially make it past this first round of the Western Conference playoffs.
Yeah, you're right, Joel. Down the stretch, both these two clubs had the exact same record in the last 10 matches. 6 wins, 3 losses, 1 tie, both for San Jose and for Sporting KC. On the Sporting KC side, and we'll get to them in just a second, but it's fair to say that their last 7 of those 10 games were decided by a goal in those games, both wins and losses. Alex Morgan, coming to you now. A big game today for the San Jose Earthquakes.
Yeah, Charles, it's a huge game. It's a benchmark game for this club. This is what Matias Almeyda was brought to San Jose to do. He was brought to San Jose to make them a competitive playoff team, to establish an identity in this club, and I think he's done that. So far, we know how the San Jose Earthquakes are going to play. He's made them a wild card team, and then he was brought here to make them successful, and I think that starts today. That starts today with their first playoff game since 2017.
Let's go ahead and take a look at the San Jose Earthquakes lineup. It just came out about 3 or 4 minutes ago. Carlos Fierro, he's expected to play just underneath Wando. Andy Rios not in that midfield trio. Shea Salinas gets the start on the left. There was a question about Marco Lopez, whether he would be in the side or not, or whether it would be Tommy Thompson. But Marco Lopez, the Peruvian who has been absolutely outstanding this season, starts at that left back position. Let's take a look at Sporting KC's lineup as well. The big, talking point here is no Alan Pulido in this team today. And Jamon, let's talk a little bit about Sporting KC. But before that, we have a little clip of Jackson Ewell, the vice captain, talking about what the Quakes are going to be seeing from Sporting KC. Their first game in a year and a half against Sporting KC. They haven't played them this season so far.
Yeah, well, first, I think they added a few new players. They have some really good goal scorers. They have some good, dangerous guys out on the wing. But I think their defensive shape is what does them really well. They're a very compact team, and they're hard to break down. And I don't think they allow a lot of teams to play how they want to and to be comfortable. So I think that's something that we're looking at and we're trying to solve. And I think it'll be a really good game for both teams. To try to figure each other out and try to create chances.
Yeah, let's talk about that Quakes lineup there, Alex.
Yeah, Charles. So there are a couple surprises. One big surprise in this Quakes lineup, which is Salinas in for Andy Rios. Andy Rios was listed as questionable on the injury report with a hip injury. He's available on the bench, but it's Salinas starting on that left wing position. We expect Carlos Fierro to move centrally And I'm happy with this change, honestly. Salinas has played outstandingly in the last couple games this season in the run, and he had huge assists from the bench in that victory over LAFC that catapulted the Quakes into the playoffs and earlier in the season. So I think, honestly, even though Sporting Kansas City are the superior team on paper, the Quakes are well positioned for an upset here.
Yeah, Harrison Crow actually says Jamon rules. Let's get into this science and data of Jamon Moore. In his mind, he apparently put in 6 hours of studying of Sporting KC. But Sporting KC, they also missed out on the playoffs in 2019, similarly to the San Jose Earthquakes team, but they catapulted themselves to number 1 in this Western Conference. And I know it starts with set pieces, both defensively, both defending against them for this SKC side, but also scoring them too, Jamon.
Yeah, in this shortened season, one of the things that I put out on Twitter this morning was showing how important set pieces were. In this season, we see them more important than any season since 2016 in terms of goals scored. And the teams that were able to take advantage of that had a leg up on other teams, as well as the teams who were able to defend them. And nobody did the combination of those two things better than Sporting Kansas City. So we have a couple charts here that show, how they made this big improvement from 2019 to 2020, because you're right, Charles, they finished out of the playoffs in 2019. And so they had to make some pretty big adjustments. And one of the things that they were able to adjust was the defending on set pieces. That was a big problem for them in 2019. So if you can bring up the first chart there, Jason. So you can see here, the Quakes in 2019, 39 goals for in the run of play, 11 dead ball goals. By dead ball, what we mean is corners, set pieces, free kicks, direct on goal, throw-ins, those types of situations where you're basically starting from a dead point. And you can see that Sporting Kansas City, they've been able to pick up and score more of those goals in about 10 fewer games than they did in 2019. Already in 2020, they've equaled the same output. They've already scored just as many. And the Quakes have done fairly well in that department, but they're not scoring quite as many in the run of play this year as compared to last year. If they had another 10 more games, maybe it would show up. But you can see Sporting Kansas City is just scoring more of those set piece type goals and just about around the same kind of output on the run of play side that they had last season. But if you now go for the goals against, if you could bring up the second chart, on the goals against side, here's where the massive difference shows up. Look at Sporting Kansas City for this season compared to last season there at the bottom. Against and in the run of play, 53 goals against last year, only 19 this year. I don't care how many more games there would be in a regular season. That's not, that's not going to happen. You're not going to get from 19 to 53. And 14 of those dead ball goals, only 4 this season. That is how Sporting Kansas City has turned the season around. They are red hot coming into the playoffs, winners, I believe, of their last 3. And they've equaled the number of points that the Quakes have done in their last 10. So this is really a matchup of 2 of the hottest teams in MLS coming in right now. And, it's going to be, I think, a pretty exciting game for neutrals, such as Harrison Crow, by the way, to be able to watch, because you're going to see, I think, 2 of the best teams right now. But the big question for the Quakes is, can they stop those set pieces? Can they keep this game close, give themselves a chance? If they give up a set piece goal early, that hasn't boded well for this team in the past. That's when they tend to give up more goals. But if they can keep the game tight, if they can get the first goal on the road, they've got a chance to be able to emerge from this. Now, I've got a third chart here, Jason, if you could bring up the third one. That I wanted to point out. So what's happening in the run of play as well? Sorry, there's a fourth chart if you have it, Jason. We think we already talked about this one. So let's talk about the run of play real quick. So what you can see here that Sporting Kansas City is doing different in the run of play this year is they're playing those progressive passes. And the reason for this is they've got a ton of speed up top. Even without Alan Pulido, they've got Gerso, they've got Shelton, and they've just got that speed on the wings that's going to allow them, I think, to be very dangerous today. It's going to be up to the Quakes back line to really try to control that speed. This might be one of those games you don't want to see Nick Lima push too high up in, and the outside backs push too high up in, because that speed is so dangerous. This is a little bit like playing an LAFC type situation where you need to make sure that you keep a lot of that speed in front of you and be aware of the counterattacks.
All right, let's hear from Christian Espinosa and hear about his thoughts on Sporting KC.
Realmente tenemos que estar muy atentos quizás en el ataque de ellos, que son muy buenos. Es un equipo muy completo que también tiene una gran defensa.
We need to be focused and precise whenever they are attacking, and they've shown that they have a solid defense as well.
Creo que es un equipo muy completo y en el cual nosotros tenemos que hacer las cosas casi a la perfección para poder sacar adelante el partido.
And they have a complete roster in which we need to perform almost perfectly in order for us to be able to take the game and win the match.
There you have the Quakes record signing, chatting about what it is to take on Sporting KC. Alex, how did the Quakes use their training time this week?
Yeah, so the Quakes had 2 full weeks to prepare for this game, Charles. And that's something they've not had for a long time. They were playing games back to back to back, Wednesday, Saturday games, for the best part of 2 months between September and August. And Matias Almeida repeatedly complained about that lack of training time. But they've had 2 weeks to prepare for this game, and they've made the most of it. We spoke to Jackson Ewell midweek. He had a press conference. He said that basically they used that time to get back to basics, to go to the fundamentals, to drill their pressure, to drill their buildup, and to drill their 1v1 skills. That was the first week of training. And then the second week of training, they used to be able to do some opposition analysis, to learn where Sporting Kansas City are dangerous, how they can mitigate those dangers, and then take advantage of Sporting Kansas City. And listening to Jamon talk about the charts and listening to Christian Espinosa run it down there, I'm actually fairly optimistic. I'm fairly optimistic that the Quakes can defend set pieces, because I think their set piece defending has significantly improved since September, because JT Marcinkowski is in goal. I remember Daniel Vega would always get caught in no man's land on set pieces, and I think that was one of the main reasons why the Quakes struggled to defend them last year and earlier this season. But since JT came in goal, he's been really confident claiming balls in the air. And also, I think since Florian Jungwirth earned a starting spot and Almeida kind of figured out his back line, I think, if I'm right, the Quakes have only allowed 2 goals from set pieces since September in the last month and a half. So I think that bodes well for today.
Joel Soria, Matias Almeida is somewhat of a specialist in playoff type scenarios, both CONCACAF Champions League, both in Liga MX as well. The Quakes did somewhat well getting to the quarterfinal earlier this season in the MLS is Back tournament. But what do they learn from that? How do they kind of respond and kind of create that type of energy that they've manufactured from something like that, and under the tutelage of a manager such as Almeida, to bring that forward to today?
Well, let me just go ahead and read off this quote that I picked up from the San Jose Earthquakes media team late last night. And it reads, if you get a hold of any journalist, GM, or anyone who follows MLS today, surely none of they would agree that San Jose is a candidate to win the title. We're aware of that, but nobody takes our dream from us. And that was from Matias Almeida, speaking about the eternal positivism that is within this team and that is within Matias Almeida as he heads into these do or die situations. As we all very well know, Matias is a master when it comes to these type of tournament scenarios in which teams need to go out and give it all they got. As I mentioned earlier today, the Quakes have to, and I repeat, they have to play to their strengths. They can't invite Sporting Kansas City to play on their half, much less on their first third. I think the Quakes have to stick to their guns. They have to mark tight, and they also have to press up. Look, this is also going to be a very entertaining game, in my opinion. And I really, really do like the Quakes' chances here, despite the odds not being in their favor. I mean, we talk about the Quakes having a 19 to 21% chance of winning the game, depending on who your source is. And if we pay attention to SofaScore, and if we give SofaScore the final word, they say that in scenarios in which the Earthquakes have a 19% chance of winning the game, they only end up winning 1% of those games. So let's say that the odds are really not in their favors at all. But I like their chances, and I'll tell you why. The San Jose Earthquakes have gone up against Sporting Kansas City twice in the Matias Almeida era. Both games happened in 2019. Peter Vermes is a coach that very, very well respects Matias Almeida, and vice versa. They both have thrown flowers at each other in the past. In fact, Vermes said this leading up to the game tonight. He said, quote, "They get chastised or criticized for at times playing man marking, but at times they are incredibly organized and they have an incredible work ethic on the field. We have an incredible amount of respect for the game, the way they go out about their business, and we know it's going to be a battle." It is going to be a battle. If we go back in time and we travel to April of 2019, when the Quakes hosted Sporting Kansas City at Earthquake Stadium, the Earthquakes ended up winning that match 4-1. And if I'm not mistaken, Shea Salinas was in that starting 11. Shea Salinas plays tonight. I think the Quakes like their chances. I have a feeling, as we already know, the one thing about Sporting Kansas City, and Jamon, you were talking about their turnaround. That was the biggest turnaround in MLS history. For those of you who might be asking yourselves, they ended last season in the 11th position in the Western Conference. They managed to climb that steep mountain and end as the perennial threat in the Western Conference. Now, in fact, they haven't been given the credit. And in fact, I think Sporting Kansas City is playing with a chip on its shoulders, but I don't think that's enough. I don't think that's enough to put them in a comfortable position. What would have put them in a comfortable position is having Alan Pulido, who's played 12 games this season. He started 11 and he scored 6 goals and assisted 5 times. That's almost an 100% on an efficiency scale. They don't have him tonight. Sporting Kansas City knows how they play. They very, very know their strengths as well. But I think in this matchup, the Earthquakes can definitely surprise with their style and their dynamism.
Yeah, by the bookies and odds makers, they are underdogs, but there is a lot of optimism, as you had just mentioned, Joel Soria, in terms of that. Let's hear from Cristian Espinosa about how Sporting Kansas City are favorites, but how the Quakes definitely have manufactured their own optimism.
Mira, la realidad es que para todo el mundo el favorito es Kansas, pero para nosotros mismos, nosotros somos los favoritos. Si nosotros estamos enfocados en nuestro juego y hacemos bien las cosas, tenemos grandes chances de sacar el partido adelante.
The reality is that Kansas is a favorite for everyone. However, for us internally here in the team, we are the favorites. So it's really a matter for us to get ourselves together and do everything possible in order for us to achieve the good results.
There's Espinosa talking about favorites versus underdogs. Jamon, before we break here for this match, your final thoughts, keys to the game.
Right, it's going to be controlling the set pieces and keeping this game close and keeping it in the run of play where the Earthquakes have a dynamic offense. They've got dynamic players on the field who can put the balls in the net. And they're going to need to shut down the wings. They're going to need to shut down Johnny Russell. They're going to need to shut down Verso. They're going to need to shut everything down on that front line of Sporting Kansas City, and that's how they give themselves a chance. In terms of what Alex was talking about with the set pieces, since JT Marcinkowski has come in goal, the Earthquakes have only given up 2 of those set piece goals. It has been better with JT Marcinkowski. They're going to need for that to continue today.
Yeah, Alex, your final thoughts on this game.
Yeah, Charles, I think this game is a wild card. I really do. Usually when it's a number 1 seed going up against a number 8 seed, the number 1 seed is heavily favored. But I think this game could go either way. San Jose won 1 and lost 1 against Sporting Kansas City last season, but they haven't played Sporting Kansas City this year, so we really just don't know what the matchup will look like. And I don't think you can count them out of this one because of that. Not when they have the all-time leading goal scorer in MLS on their team and Chris Wondolowski, when they've got some informed players like Carlos Fierro and Shea Salinas, when they've got the pace of Christian Espinosa up front. This is a team that beat LAFC pretty convincingly in their last meaningful game of the season. They've been trending upwards. So I think they can get a result today, especially because of the injury to Alan Pulido.
What about you, Joel?
Well, look, let's start off with this. Sporting Kansas City is a top 10 side at home, but ironically, they're pretty leaky when it comes to playing at Children's Mercy Park. The majority of the goals that they've conceded have come at home. And if we follow along, the history timeline, we know that Peter Vermees is willing to give Matias' side the position advantage. I think that the Quakes will have possession tonight, but then I also do think that Sporting Kansas City's emblematic pressure, high field pressure is going to come into effect. They're going to try and suffocate the Quakes playing out of the back, and that's I think going to be a main key factor in this game. Are the Quakes going to be able to loft over those 2 lines of pressure or that one strong line of pressure? And will they be able to utilize a player like Cristian Espinosa or a player like Carlos Fierro on a fast break or on a through ball, whether it be aerial or a precise ground pass? I think that's where the key is, because if we go back again to that April game of last year against Sporting Kansas City, the Quakes were able to exploit that Sporting Kansas City deficiency. Sporting Kansas City would play with their back line almost at the halfway line, and trying to suffocate the Quakes, and the Quakes would go over. And at that time, obviously, Danny Husen was the target man, and Danny Husen is a really good profile player for that. They don't have him this time around, but I think that they can still utilize players like Fierro and Espinosa to do the same damage. If the Quakes do get invited to have possession, and if the Quakes are on Sporting Kansas City's first third, I imagine that Sporting KC is going to be very, very difficult to break down. They're a very organized team, and Ilie Sanchez, their number 6, has been pretty stellar and one of the influential players, and one of the biggest reasons why Sporting Kansas City has been on this unbeaten run since mid-October. So I also do believe that it's an open game. I don't think that there is a clear favorite, to be honest with you, from a football perspective. The bookies might say otherwise, but I really feel optimistic about the Earthquakes' chances if, as Cristian Espinosa mentioned, if they're able to execute their game plan 90%, at least 90%, I think that the Earthquakes can surprise and knock out Sporting Kansas City.
Well said, lads. Very well said. Make sure that you stick around here for Black and Azul post-game. It will be episode number 74. Again, it'll be episode number 74, so you might want to stick around for Black and Azul postgame. We will bring you live coverage of Matias Almeida and a few players, whether they win, whether they lose. So make sure that you stick around for that. I've been looking at form and form guides form notes, those types of things. And these two teams are exactly in the same position as one another. You look at Sporting KC, you look at the fact that both San Jose and Sporting KC down the stretch, 6 wins, 3 losses, 1 tie. Sporting KC involved in a lot of 1-goal games. The fact that they don't have Alan Pulido, the fact that the Quakes had to make just the one change there, swapping in Shea Salinas, who's been a super sub really the last few games, and he'll be on that wing. Carlo Fierro getting the chance to start underneath for Andy Rios, and then Marco Lopez slotting in at that left back position. I think it's going to be well matched, like both Joel, Alex, and Jamon also said as well. Before we wrap up today, I just want to let everybody know that club legend, former captain Victor Muma Bernardes has a GoFundMe fundraiser for Hurricane Ada. As you may know, or if you've been watching the news, Hurricane Ada has just kind of ravaged Central America, Honduras, Costa Rica, parts of Panama, parts of Nicaragua and Guatemala. And so he has a fundraiser. He's about $1,250 away from his goal as well there. So make sure that you get the chance to donate to help out the Honduran people and to help former club legend Victor Muma Bernardes be able to help Honduran families. With that being said, my name is Charles Wollin. The rest of the team is Joel Soria, Alex Morgan, Jamon Moore, associate producer Aaron Sholl, director and executive producer Jason Sholl. Thank you so much, everybody, and enjoy the game on Fox Sports 1.